We say there ought to be no sorrow, but there is sorrow. And to survive, we have to find ourselves in it. If we try to evade sorrow, refuse to lay our account with it, we are foolish. Sorrow is one of the biggest facts of life. There is no use saying sorrow ought not to be. Sorrow burns up a great amount of shallowness, but it does not always make a person better. In suffering, we either find ourselves or we destroy ourselves. You always know the person who has been through the fires of sorrow and found himself, because you are certain you can go to him in your time of sorrow. If you find yourself in the fires of sorrow, you'll be nourishment for other people. End quote. My name is Mark Graham, and I'm an American soldier. I'm also a son, a husband, and a dad. It is from this quote in Oswald Chambers, "My utmost for his highest," and from our personal tragedies that my wife Carol, our daughter Melanie, and I have come to realize that in order to survive, we had to use our brokenness to reach out and openly share our story and try to give hope to others. General and Mrs. Kelly, General Garrett, General Laverne, Admiral Horn, Colonel Barney Barham, recipient of the Congressional Medal of Honor, sir. Thank you for being here. Honorable Pam Isles, Dr. Blackjack Matthews, families of the fallen, wounded service members, and all your wonderful families, distinguished guests, and every one of you attending the conference. Thank you for being here. Thank you for what you do in serving the nation. I have to give a special thank to Kathy McCarroll, Executive Director for Family Violence, the Family Violence Project. She is tremendous. How she got me here, I'm still not sure. Schedules are pretty tight, and she was able to figure all this out and coordinate it and has done a wonderful job at putting this all together. So, Kathy, thank you for finding us and the opportunity to speak. There are just not enough words to express gratitude for the service you give to the nation. This is indeed a very important event. As a leader in the Army, mental, physical, and spiritual fitness in our service members and families is very personal to Carol and I. And those of you here not in uniform, thank you too for doing all you do to help others, to help service members. Now, I'm an Army guy, and you'll hear me say soldiers a lot. Just get over it. I mean, I know you're Marines, hoorah, but when you hear me say hoorah, it's okay. It kind of all has an H there. But I am grateful and honored to be invited to be with you today. This type of event, it really embodies what is good about America, reaching out and helping others. The work done here will impact across the Marine Corps and the entire military, and truly across the entire nation. Those of you here in this room play a key part, directly or indirectly, in saving lives every day. Many of you don't even realize you do. My wife Carol and I are grateful to be connected to you as we share this mission together. We're here to get in front of suicide, to prevent it by action, not just to figure it out after the fact. We're here to honestly acknowledge the toll suicide is taking on our Army, our Marine Corps, our Navy, and our Air Force, and our communities, and truly across the nation, to raise awareness to the dangers of untreated depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, traumatic brain injury, and other mental health illnesses. For too many years, ignorance has created a stigma that has kept us from recognizing the warning signs of depression and suicide. Suicide, just the word, makes people nervous. Suicide, just the word, makes you uncomfortable. Suicide, just the word, clears out a cocktail party. In fact, even today, we are reluctant to discuss suicide in many circles. A hush tone commonly is brought across a room when someone says the word suicide. I'm here to tell you that we cannot be quiet any longer. We cannot take that hushed tone when speaking of suicide, and we cannot ignore the warning signs any longer. People are hurting. They need to be helped, not judged. My wife Carol and I missed the warning signs of our son's depression and just could not see the illness, if left untreated, was potentially as deadly as if he had cancer or heart disease. Every door a Marine walks through to ask for support needs to be the right door. As a father, I'm going to share with you a very personal story today. I also hope to share a message with you, and this is a message of faith, hope, and love. You'll notice I'm reading these remarks because I often have a hard time getting through it. For me, faith, hope, and love began at home. My mother raised me by herself. Since I was 11 years old, my father suddenly died of a heart attack. My mom raised me with tremendous love and wisdom. Sometime during this journey, I was led to Oswald Chambers' devotion that has had a profound impact on my life. Carol and I started our journey together just after college. It was a wonderful story. As we raised 3 fantastic children together, we traveled the globe on various military assignments. However, during our journey, we've tragically added 2 tragic chapters to the book of our life. Our journey has been tested. Our faith has been rattled. Our moral courage and left us seeming empty and hopelessness at times. Most importantly, though, it has provided us a direction that has revealed enormous purpose for our lives. Over the years, I've learned a lot about life, about leadership, management, and those ideals necessary to being successful in our profession. The single most important thing I've learned is that no one is isolated from hardship. Everyone seems to be going through something, whether directly or indirectly. I've learned to be a leader, and to lead an institution or organization's success, you must focus on the needs of others, not your own. I've learned that leaders can have compassion. Leaders can be passionate. Leaders can be emotional. They can be tough, but most importantly, leaders are human and just as vulnerable as anyone else. Never could my parents, my wife, or my profession have prepared me for what has happened in the last 7 years. For those of you here today unfamiliar with our journey, let me begin by telling you that Carol and I have lost 2 sons. Just 7 months before our oldest son, Jeffrey, was killed in Iraq, we lost our younger son, Kevin, to suicide. Kevin died fighting a different kind of battle than Jeff. The devastating realization that we had lost one son was the heaviest burden imaginable at the time, but to lose both of our sons was truly beyond comprehension. 7 years ago, we thought we had one of those Walt Disney kind of lives. Our 3 children were college students sharing an apartment at the University of Kentucky. All 3 of them living together in one apartment. Hard to believe. 3 kids from the same family living together. But with one phone call, the world as we knew it was gone. We would never be the same. Even after 7 years, many mornings I still wake up thinking this is a bad dream or someone else's story, but surely it's not my story. Our children had been our whole world, so in order to keep on living, we had to find a healthy way to channel our grief. Today we live one day at a time. On June 21st, 2003, we lost our son Kevin to suicide. Kevin was a senior Army ROTC cadet on a scholarship studying to be a doctor. He wanted to be an Army doctor. He was a scholarship student battling depression and stopped taking his medication because he did not want the Army to know of his illness. When Kevin died, we were stationed in Korea and blamed ourselves for not recognizing the serious warning signs that Kevin's depression was a true medical illness and not just a sad feeling. For years, we had talked to our kids about alcohol, drugs, strangers, just about anything we could to think of to keep them safe and healthy. But our ignorance in thinking that all it took to fight depression was a prayer, a proper diet, exercise, and a good night's sleep kept us from getting our son Kevin the best medical care possible. Following Kevin's death, we primarily focused on raising awareness to the dangers of untreated depression and had begun setting up suicide prevention programs on college campuses. We somehow knew that something good had to come from Kevin's death. Carol and I made that our primary mission as our daughter Melanie tried desperately to continue her studies at the University of Kentucky. And while our son Jeffrey, a recent civil engineering graduate from the University of Kentucky, was stationed at Fort Knox, Kentucky, preparing for combat. I can remember so clearly the morning of February 19th, 2004. 5:30 in the morning, I was shaving, and Carol came to the bathroom and said, "Yeah, I've just read on the internet where 2 soldiers were killed in Chaldea near Fallujah. Isn't that where Jeffrey is?" She asked me if we would know if that was Jeffrey or not. And I said, "Carol, no, I don't think we would know just yet. But never in a million years do you ever believe that it could be your son or your daughter. Certainly not again. Not again." As you can imagine, in the midst of unspeakable grief, we were overwhelmed once again. But the outpouring of love and support from our family, to include our military family, friends, and hundreds of people we didn't even know, has been a true inspiration to each of us. So many dear people seem to come from all over to help us shoulder our grief and give us courage to keep on living. The ones that helped us the most were the ones that they themselves had survived unimaginable tragedy. Because our hearts were completely broken and our stories so unbelievable, we were then open for them to share with us their deepest losses and their pain. We were astounded by the horrible things so many people had been carrying in their hearts for so long. There were many stories just as unimaginable as ours. So Carol and I flew back to Fort Sill, Oklahoma, after Jeffrey's death, and we were very fragile and broken. As a senior officer in the Army, I honestly did not know if I could continue to keep on serving. We left our daughter once again at the University of Kentucky. No matter how hard we tried to convince her to join us in Oklahoma, she looked at us and said, "You make me too sad." So we flew back to Fort Sill on March the 10th. And that night, as we walked into our government quarters, Carol and I were both grieving so deeply that I truly did not think I could continue to serve in the Army. That night, we barely slept, and by morning, I was positive that it was time to put in my retirement papers. As Carol and I sat down at the kitchen table for the first cup of coffee, she began to read the daily devotional for March the 11th. The expression on her face completely startled me. As I watched, she had tears flowing down her face. I will never forget the way she choked back her words as she began to read the daily devotional for March the 11th from Streams in the Desert, written by L.B. Cowan, and I quote, "Yesterday you experienced a great sorrow, and now your home seems empty. Your impulse is to give up amid your dashed hopes. Yet you must defy that temptation, for you are at the front line of battle, and the crisis is at hand. Faltering even for one moment would put God's interest at risk. Other lives will be harmed by your hesitation, and His work will suffer if you simply fold your hands. You must not linger at this point, even to indulge your grief." A famous general once related this sorrowful story from his own wartime experience. His son was the lieutenant of an artillery platoon, and an assault was in progress. As the father led his division in his charge, pressing across the battlefield, suddenly his eye caught sight of a dead artillery officer lying right before him. Just a glance was all it took to know that it was his own son. The general's fatherly impulse was to kneel by the body of his beloved son and stay to express his grief, but the duty of the moment demanded he press on with the charge. So after kissing his dead son, he hurried away, leading his command in the battle. Weeping inconsolably forever beside a grave will never bring back the treasure of a lost one. Sorrow causes deep scars and indelibly writes its story on the suffering heart. We never completely recover from our greatest griefs and are never quite the same having passed through them. Yet sorrow that is endured in the right spirit impacts our growth favorably and brings us a greater sense of compassion for others. Sitting down and continuously brooding over our sorrow deepens the darkness surrounding us, allowing it to creep into our heart, and soon our strength has changed to weakness. But if we turn from the gloom and remain faithful, the light will shine again, and we will grow stronger." End quote. Needless to say, that specific story on that specific morning seemed like there was still a mission for Carol and I. And that mission we thought was to continue to serving soldiers and families in our Army. Even though Carol and I have made this commitment to keep on going, it's not been easy. I made speeches as soldiers deployed and redeployed. We celebrated welcome home ceremonies and watched as families were reunited after long separations. Our friends' children had